If I die and come back as a hillbilly, is that reincarnation? I'm gonna have to mullet that over for a minute. What's going on, YouTube? It is 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which means we're inside the Hollow City, inside a Cold Harbor, because from now until early Monday morning, Zanil has, as well as another golden vendor, some rotational items for us. Now, this week we have plants. Now, plants are non-conspicuous, but I do just want to point out how cheap these are. And a lot of times you can usually resell these in the future. I've seen a lot of people do some things, especially with things like these bushes and ferns. But overall, probably nothing that you're going to get super excited about. Although this one definitely does give me some like Jurassic Park vibes. But I also don't know how you build a T-Rex using existing housing items. But if you're watching this, Sauce, hear me out. There has to be some sort of lore accurate T-Rex that you could put in the game. Maybe it's from like the first era, you know, or something like that. But that would be absolutely awesome. But overall, nothing in here that's definitely essential, you know, to purchase. But I would say most of these are probably decent if you wanted to try to flip them. I don't really understand what's happening with this plant here. I don't know if it's winning or losing the battle, if it's all one plant, if it's coexisting with another plant or what. But I think this one is the new one. But everything else, it's like, it's plants. And as we jump into the second vendor, I just wanted to thank you guys for following with me while I recover from bronchitis. Really annoying to edit these videos because I'm like tweaking my audio a little bit just so I sound a little bit more normal. And for some reason, I put on a red polo today. It makes me feel like a State Farm employee, like the true Jake from State Farm employee that I am. And thank you guys for 28K subscribers. You guys are fantastic. But we are less than 50 subscribers away from our next goal. So please hit the subscribe button. Let's jump into the next golden vendor, because we're inside of Cyrodiil, which right now obviously has having its whole kerfuffle going on with all the events that are going on inside of all the different Cyrodiil campaigns. But if you go to your northern gates or your gates, you're going to be able to find the golden vendor. And if you talk to them, this week is definitely special because it's every PvP set that you can gain from a few different methods, mostly from your elite vendors and your non-elite vendors in Cyrodiil, are in store. So there's a lot of options, and rings are the better ones because you generally need 2 rings, because you can only wear 1 necklace, but you can wear 2 rings even though you have 10 fingers and 10 toes, depending on how you like to wear your rings. Let's get some common thoughts out of the way, because these are comments that I see usually on these videos. 375,000 alliance points is both a lot of alliance points and not a lot of alliance points. For example, I have tens of millions of AP stored across multiple characters. I actually know multiple people with over 1 billion AP. Fun fact, when I was talking to a developer, I think all the way back in 2023 about this, because I was like, hey, like, is there going to be any plans to put in, like, you know, like an archival fortune type vendor where I could turn it into, like, provisioning ingredients, you know, something like that. The response was, there's so much alliance points held by players that they essentially could just decimate the economy if we put, you know, too many new ways to turn your AP into gold, because there are certain players that just have that much amount of alliance points. So from that aspect, we could think of a couple things here. People are going to be converting their AP throughout the week into these items. So if you were to go to Mournhold right now, which is basically like Walmart or Target, you're going to be able to find all these PvP sets listed there, because there's going to be people who have tens of millions of AP, like myself, who are just buying these, throwing them on the market for some gold, and just, you know, moving on with our day. You know, Vicious Death is a perfect example of it. Vicious Death has been naturally good for years. If you have a bunch of AP, throw some AP into this, throw it into the market, you're good to go. So if you have tons of AP, this is great. Even if you have a decent amount of AP and you don't want to use gold, this is a great vendor as well. And if you don't have a lot of AP, but you have a lot of gold, also good too. You just go straight into Mournhold and you'll be able to find these listed. Or you could even say, hey, looking to buy, you know, transmutation gold rings, and you could probably find a vendor that way as well. So that being said, what are some sets that I would focus on if I was, you know, trying to flip these? Because at the end of the day, too, the best ones are always going to be, you know, more name brand meta builds, but also, too, if people aren't noticing, like transmutation, the set that we just looked at, oftentimes gets kind of overlooked. So sometimes if you're the only one listing a set, you can make a ton of gold that way. Perfect example, Crafty Alfik is one of the most popular sets in the game. There was like a month period where nobody was farming it, so it's not a hard farm. It's an overland set, but I was one of the only people farming it, putting it onto the market, and therefore I was making tons of gold. So think of that as well too as we look at some of these sets. That it's not just about what's the most popular meta, most gigafarts of damage per second. It's also which one has a supply and demand gap that I can fill to profit if that's what your goal is. First is decently popular one is Elysian. It's armor, health, increase your health recovery by 2% based on the total sum of your physical and spell resistance up to 1320. And mine, which is by no means optimized for that, is already at 834 health recovery. Now, obviously, health recovery is not something you generally want to use for PvP. So honestly, Zos, you should make this 5-piece not affected by battle spirit. Hear me out. But that being said, I do think that this is still a decent defensive set, even for PvP, just because it's giving you armor, health, and then the health recovery is certainly not that good because it's going to be affected by battle spirit. But there's also not that many good defensive sets for Cyrodiil. Most of the time, we just end up wearing sustain sets. That being said, though, outside of Cyrodiil, this is an even better defensive set if you needed something where, you know, maybe you wanted to be a little bit more defensive with your solo build. You could certainly look at something like Elysian. You're probably not going to use this on too many tanking builds, but you could look at something like this too because you could get a decent amount of health recovery. There used to be health recovery builds back in the day that would stack health recovery out the wazoo, like 7k health recuv builds. Thankfully, we're not in that day and age anymore, but those used to exist. Battalion Defender is a great ball group set because when you block, you heal the other people around you for a decent chunk of healing. Curse Eating is also a really funny build because it used to be something that you could kill your enemies with if they had Plague Breaks on them. However, Plague Break's not nearly as strong as it was. But overall, this is still a decent sustain set just based on how much magicka it can give you back. Obviously, sets like Wretched Vitality being a crafted set really still give sets like this a run for its money and probably still edge it out, but it's still a decent consideration if you're looking for something. Deadly is just one of the best sets in the game. It's been one of the best sets in the game. Will continue to be one of the best sets in the game. Eagle-Eyed is just interesting because it's a 3-piece. One of the only 3-pieces. Every time I always go and look for 3-piece sets, there's never any on the market. So Eagle-Eyed, one to consider. Maybe people out there making mark and ring builds with it. Mara's Balm is interesting because it's not as bad as people say that it is. I definitely do think it's obviously been significantly nerfed, but it still does see quite a bit of utilization, mainly because there's still just not a set that's consistently like it. So overall, Mara's Balm, probably not one that you want to purchase, but one that people still do definitely use. And I'm curious to see people actually buy this on the market, because what I plan to do is tomorrow, I'm just going to sit in the guild traders and see which rings have been selling, just because I'm curious, and I think Mara's Ball might see actually some sales. Plague Break, not what it used to be, but it is still a great set, especially if Cyrodiil's population is going to be increased. What's a better set to do that than Plague Break? Plague Break literally benefits. It wants people close to each other. It wants to blow them up. It loves it. Rallying Cry, like Wretched Vitality, is the PvP set. When you think of PvP sets, you think of Rallying Cry. It gives you an unnamed buff for offense and defense. It's great. Like it's just one of the sets in the game that you think of when you think of PvP, because it's just a fantastic one to use. Ancient Grace, in the day and age of max mag builds, highly underrated, great for mark and ring builds. If you're thinking, maybe you don't want to use Death Dealer's Feet, maybe you want to use the mark and ring, feel free to slap on Ancient Grace and you'll be happy as can be. Dark Convergence almost feels like a support set these days, but it supports you by pulling everybody into a vortex and blowing them all up, which is a great way to support your team. Elfbane is a bit finicky. While in combat, increases the duration of your flame damage over time abilities by 5 seconds, and then this does not, however, work on beam or channeled effects. This is still pretty good. Elfbane sees a lot of utilization, usually outside of Cyrodiil for certain like flame-based builds, but Overall, it's not as good as it used to be, but you could still get decent value from it. Imperial Wrath, another 3-piece set, weapon and spell, and then weapon and spell to your ranged direct damaged abilities. Definitely could see a lot of play with that. Mark and Ring, 3-piece, great one to use. Oak Father's Retribution is easily becoming one of the more name brand popular sets to recommend to people because you're getting offensive penetration against enemies with major buffs, and then weapon and spell damage against those minor buffs. So, I mean, overall, you could get a ton of value out of a set like this. Sentry is a fun set because it's the kill the people in stealth inside of Imperial City set, or you could just use it to kill, stream snipers, and it still gives you a 5-piece of 266 weapon and spell damage. So yes, its 5-piece of stealth detection is obviously hit or miss based on whether or not you need it, but it still is a great set. I don't know why more people don't use sets like these. Although it's probably one of those sets that you don't realize somebody's using until you're like, whoa, what the heck happened to me? Transmutation is just naturally suggested still as like the default PvP healer set. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that it's as good as some of the forums online make it sound to be, but there definitely still is a good market for this item. Vicious Death, we already talked about. It's its own staple archetype. And that's where we wrap up. Thank you guys so much again for watching. And I just wanted to thank you guys again for all the subscriptions recently. And even still, we're actually 50 subscribers exactly away from our next 100 goal. So if you guys would not mind, hit the subscribe button. As always, we're doing our 3 giveaway drawings. All you need to do to enter is leave a comment, comments below, / leave a like. Second thing is just make sure you're subscribed. And then the third thing is just make sure you look for a hidden word be flashed upon the screen. If you're the first person to find and comment that word, you will win. Thank you guys one last time. Have a happy weekend, and I'll catch you later. Bye, guys.
You better remember to like and subscribe to Jakeclips. Or you should. I might have to pluck your eyes if you don't. Or, better yet, I'll skip rope with your entrails. Do it now. Subscribe. Ta-ta. Off with you.